Welcome. We are going to be talking about some of the factors that Todd Chrisley used in order to ask for a reduced sentence, a downward departure. And here's the thing. So I want to focus actually on one in particular, and that is his age. Yeah. Now, there are a lot of different things that he can bring up to try to say, hey, look at these mitigating factors that need to be considered. And hey, give me less time. At this point in time, we do know that he did get a sentence of 144 months. But let's go back and see what he talked about, what his attorney brought up in terms of his age and how that should be considered. And I'm thinking to myself that I think maybe he's only a few years older than me. I don't know. Maybe I need to look it up because I don't exactly remember. But I don't think he's that much older than I am. And you guys, I'm sorry to painfully take you through most of this, but I don't remember what page this is on. And it's somewhere down here. So we're going to go through this. Okay, so this is the first part where he gets into the request for a below sentence guideline. Well, let me just sort of scroll through this as we get down here. So yes, so he's got some of this here, further crimes, education, yeah, to afford adequate deterrence to criminal conduct. And I think one of the things they were saying was that, yeah, he probably isn't going to do this again, to protect the public. And remember, I mentioned some of this in another video that where the government was saying, "Hey, they can't show that they're not a danger." But okay, there's this need to provide the restitution. I talked about that in another video. He's supposed to be paying $1,000 a month. The restitution is over $17 million. Okay, so let's talk about this age. Here's where we get into the age under D on page 17. It looks like defendant's age supports a below guidelines sentence under 18 U.S. Code section 3553. The federal sentencing guidelines, as originally promulgated in 1987, provided that an individual's age, health, or mental health was not ordinarily relevant in determining whether a sentence should be outside the applicable guideline range. The Supreme Court effectively ended these limitations in United States v. Booker, and the guidelines were amended as of November 1st, 2010, to provide that age, physical condition, and mental health may be relevant. So, under this section, under the US Code, it used to say, hey, that's not really relevant. But now we've had this case that changed all of that. It says the National Institute of Corrections defines prisoners 50 and older as elderly and aging. Okay, personally, my feelings are hurt since I am above that age. So I guess I am, according to the National Institute of Corrections, I am elderly and aging. All right, it says a defendant's age at 51 can and should be considered in sentencing. I get it. But, it's almost taken on an individual personal basis. Because incarceration can be substantially more punitive for an older defendant than the heartland offender, sentencing leniency based on older age promotes the penal goals of imposing sufficient punishment and avoiding unwarranted sentencing disparities under 18 USC section 3553. Older prisoners, even if they are not suffering illness, can find the ordinary rigors of prison particularly difficult because of a general decline in physical and often mental functioning, which affects how they live in their environments and what they need to be healthy, safe, and have a sense of well being. And this comes from Human Rights Watch. Old behind bars, the aging prison population in the United States. So yeah, so at what point, it's one thing to consider it going in, but imagine that you have some people in there who are nonviolent, offenders who are serving time, at what point do we say, you know what, this person's 65 years old? You know, is it compassion? Does it make sense from a fiscal perspective to, you know, put them back out in the real world and reintroduce them into society so that they can, even in their latter years, be responsible and productive citizens? Justification for considering age is that prison facilities rules and routines were not created with older inmates in mind. As a result, ordinary incidents of prison life may challenge those who are only middle aged in the community at large. These include climbing stairs to high tier cell blocks, getting into a top bunk with a low ceiling, walking long distances for meals and other services, standing in lengthy lines for meals or pills, sleeping on thin mattresses, and enduring cold or hot temperatures. Ordinary incidents of aging present special health risks to older prisoners. Among other things, older inmates are more vulnerable to contagious diseases, face increased risk of falls, require more frequent access to toilet facilities, and require more prescription medications. They are also particularly vulnerable to the effects of over and under medicating and suffer disproportionately from a poor diet and limited exercise. Okay, so let's talk about that for a little bit because they bring up, you know, some very general comments. You know, they're sort of attributing them to him by default because of his age. And when you go back and look at the show, he seems to be someone who's getting around very well. Like if people look at me, they would say, Sheila, you know, we've seen some of your other videos. You work out, you look like you're in pretty good health. But even I can tell the difference now in terms of physical mobility and things that are harder to do and easier to do. How long it takes me to concentrate on working on a contract than, you know, now versus 10 years ago even. So these things that we've heard are not things that are new to us, and so there are definitely things that should be taken into account. So they talk about risk of fall when you get older. You're just not as stable as you used to be. You're not as mobile as you used to be. Joints are a little bit more worn out. Like these are biological facts of nature. There's no way to get around the fact that cells are older, period. Okay. Your bones have been around for a while. Now, sure, there are plenty of cells that are born new every single day. That's great. But the overall fact that you have been here for 50 plus years, yeah, that's something to take into account. All of these things that they've mentioned here are definitely considerations when you're talking about the older population being essentially locked up. All right, let's get back to where I was. Even if the Bureau of Prisons could provide adequate care for an aged defendant, this misses the mark when it comes to sentencing because the issue under Section 3553 is the need to provide medical care in the most effective manner. Any prison term is a larger portion of an older defendant's remaining years than it is of the heartland offenders. Therefore, an older defendant's shorter life expectancy supports leniency based on the sentencing goals of proportionality and avoiding unwarranted sentencing disparities. So basically, you know, what they're saying here is once you get to the point where you don't have a whole lot more years left, does it make sense to give someone the same amount of time that you would give someone who might be a whole lot younger? Because that younger person, you know, can get out after 144 months and they've still got, you know, on average, they still have all of these years left. If you're talking about somebody who committed something, say some of the FTX employees committed something in their late 20s and you say we're going to give you 144 months, well, when they get out, there's still tons of life left on average for them. But if you start to take someone who's in their late 50s and say, hey, we're going to give you 144 months, and when you get out, you're not going to have as much life left, and this is just because you committed your crimes later in life than somebody else did, there may be something to take into account there and to look at, because in terms of proportionality, that's what they said. Proportionality was what they brought up. They said, okay, so if we look at how many months we're going to imprison that person over the months that they have left, a younger person versus an older person, the proportion is just going to be different because the older person committed the crime later in life. You guys, okay, you let me know what you think of that one. Do you think that that matters, that a person is not going to live as long, and should it be proportional to their life expectancy? Because that's what they're saying here. All right. Well, that was a lot to talk about. A lower rate of recidivism for older offenders is well established and supports leniency because it allows the sentencing purposes of deterrence and protection of the public to be satisfied by a lesser term. And then they're telling you where that's coming from, the U.S. Sentencing Commission. There's a report there. There is overwhelming evidence that prisoners age 50 and older are far less likely to return to prison for new crimes than their younger cohorts. Todd Chrisley is 54 years old. Okay, so we're right here together. He has suffered with fibromyalgia since 2012. He takes several prescription medications to treat various symptoms of the disease. In addition, he has been diagnosed with anxiety and is treated with prescribed medication. Todd's father died of complications from liver disease, and his younger brother, Randy Chrisley, is disabled due to crippling scoliosis and is currently battling throat cancer. Todd's mother, Elizabeth Faye Chrisley, age 77, is battling bladder cancer. It is therefore predictable, based upon family history, that Todd will develop a life-shortening medical condition in the near future. And just like it is when you go to the doctor's office, they ask you about family history. They make you fill out all of those forms. Todd's medical condition, his age, and health needs, whether the Bureau of Prisons might be able to accommodate them or not, certainly support sentencing leniency, as he is not within the heartland of offenders. His age and medical conditions would make imprisonment disproportionately harsh. Okay, so there you have it. There they are laying out this reasoning behind why they think, his age should be taken into consideration. One, because there was this new case, United States v. Booker, that sort of said now age can be relevant. There is his family medical history that he brought up. So he's talking about his brother, he's talking about his father, and he's talking about his mom. And we all know that medical history is certainly a factor when it comes to, what you may have inherited. He also talks about the prescriptions and diagnoses that he has had. Now, it's one thing to talk about the family members. It's another thing to then talk about Todd Chrisley and some of his health issues. I think that this was maybe a little lacking here, which is a bit concerning. So for instance, let me go back to that and let's talk about why I think that is a little lacking. I'm going to scroll back up here to that so we can look back at it. I definitely think there was room for more here. Okay, so he's 54 years old, so he has hit the target from a chronological standpoint. But now we're going to get in here and talk about Todd. And literally, he has suffered with fibromyalgia since 2012. He takes several prescription medications, and he has been diagnosed with anxiety. Okay, 3 things. Okay, that's all you're going to put in there. So if I'm going to talk about fibromyalgia, it's not just that he has suffered with it since 2012. I am going to talk about how it impacts his life on a daily basis. Because remember, you're having to combat this vision that has been on reality TV of him walking around doing things and leading this seemingly okay life for someone who we are now saying age is an issue for. And how do you, how do you expect people to find it believable without more there? Fibromyalgia is one of these diagnoses that can vary in terms of its debilitating nature. So sometimes it can be really bad, other days it can be perfectly fine. So they have not really laid out a very strong case that would make the downward departure from the sentencing, this mitigating factor or something to take into account with his age is just sort of missing there. It feels like they could have added a whole lot more evidence. So not just since 2012, but here are some of the ways it impacts his daily activities in his life. Explain that and then attach that to the daily activities that he's going to have to do in prison. Like match those up and make the connection for the judge. And this just wasn't done here. Then it says he takes several prescription medications to treat various symptoms of the disease. Again, that's it. How long has he been taking those medications? Do those medications provide any side effects that may put him in a position where while he's in prison, it's going to require him to have more medical assistance? Like all of this is missing in here. And I don't want to say I feel like they just stuck this in here just to stick it in here, because I do think it is legitimate. I just don't think that they supported it as well as they could have. And the family history, I think that's fine. There's not much more you can say on that. But that was definitely an area that I felt like the attorney could have done a little bit more on. And in regards to the prescriptions, it could have been that they were trying not to be I don't want to say sharing information publicly about his medical condition. Maybe he wanted to keep that private and come back to that, and not have to share that with people overall. But that's pretty much it. That was probably the piece where I think I felt like they could have done a little bit better job on. I do like the proportionality piece. And some of these are just general pieces that anybody could use, not just him, but anybody who's arguing for this. And then the piece here, risks of falls and all of more vulnerable to contagious diseases. All of these things are already known. So it's not like those are surprising in any sort of way. But as you know, it's at 144 months, and that's what it came out to be. And it could be that later on with this appeal that there's some other things that maybe they talk about a little bit deeper. I don't know. We'll see. But hope that gave you more insight into how they were making that argument. Don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to like the video. Peace.